Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up on the Hazardous weather graphic here, we've got a wind advisory in the Alaska Range that stays out through 9 a.m. Monday morning. That's for south to southeast winds or some variation of gusting 30 to possibly as high as 50 miles per hour, especially along the Richardson Highway, south of Delta and through the passes, the higher passes as well. And those winds, along with the dry conditions, has resulted in a red flag warning, which is a warning for fire weather, for extreme fire weather conditions. And that's in effect actually currently until 10 p.m. Sunday evening, this evening. And that time the conditions should improve a little bit, at least probably humidity, and maybe the winds lightening up somewhat, although they could pick back up again since the wind advisory remains out until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Otherwise, moving on to the breakup map, breakup is essentially over here now. We've got open, even on the North Slope rivers there, the Colville and the Sagwan, mostly open, a little bit of ice up here near the Brooks Range, where it's, I guess that's classified as even mostly open in these areas and along the Noatak. So basically breakup is done, but there's still a flood advisory out here either side of the Hughes area for possible minor flooding continuing tonight and probably through tomorrow as well due to the snow melt with the warmer temperatures. On fire danger here, we've got areas of high, in some cases high-end high over the upper Yukon Valley, and then on down to the 40-mile country and toward the eastern Alaska range of slopes there. And rainfall over the Copper River Basin wiped that area out today with the precipitation there. And of course, Sitna Valley and Kenai Peninsula yesterday, or around Kenai, of those high fire dangers. Of course, the rain knocked those out as well. But on the other side of the Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley, areas of high fire danger there, and then locally up here into the central interior areas. And for the satellite imagery, here's the band of moisture, the flow of moisture here that brought the rainfall as much as half an inch in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And that occurred at Anchorage with 0.53 inches to be exact. Seward, Valdez, and Girdwood all picked up roughly half an inch of rain during the day today. That classifies as a soaking rain, so no fire danger associated with that. And the heaviest amount was at Portage Glacier, naturally, which picked up 1.5 inches of rain. With lighter amounts, there's still some light rain occurring over the Copper River Basin. The Sitna Valley had about 2/10 or 1/4 of an inch of rain there. And then an area of rain extending back to the southwest along the clouds here. Kind of a wave here developing that's shoving the front off to the east here, so it's kind of changing the orientation around from south to north to more southeast to northwest, and then flowing up around that big upper level high, as you can see over western Canada. See the clouds coming up and then kind of getting caught in the circulation. This, by the time it gets back in over the southern panhandle, that's just high stuff. And we've got some precipitation here, light rain, fog, and drizzle, St. Lawrence Island with this cloud feature extending up into the northwest coast. And then there are some areas of flurries and fog along the central Arctic coast, locally in the east. But this area back to the south, just inland, that's mostly rain, even through the Brooks Range, and some light rain for the Pribilofs, where St. George had winds gusting to about 31 miles an hour today there. And that area of moisture extended down to the eastern Aleutians, but quite light, mostly just reducing ceilings and visibilities there. And then rain, kind of a continuous light rain pattern, as I mentioned, along the Alaska Peninsula. And rolling this through again, here's roughly the frontal position this afternoon, pushing northward there. So Pretty dry afternoon here across the Yukon Delta up into eastern Norton Sound. About 1/10 of an inch of rain, though, fell today from Nome on around to Teller and Tin City and Shishmaref, all picking up anywhere from 10 to 15 hundredths of an inch or so during the day today, and some of that begins to taper off here. So this portion of the warm front pretty dry, and this just clouds with all the precipitation hanging up along and south of the Alaska range here, and not quite as extensive over the eastern Copper River Basin as what I got drawn here, but extends over to about Yakutat. Bering Sea, weak low with winds maybe gusting 35 miles an hour in some areas here, the eastern Aleutians, and more like 25 back to the west, and some fog out towards Shimia. And a nice day today across the southeast coast with mostly sunny conditions, as well as the areas north, or the 40-mile country right on up toward actually almost out to the eastern Arctic coast. And for tonight, that front continues to move eastward and weakens, really weakening through here, but that's going to push a band of light precipitation eastward there, or continue to try. It doesn't look like it'll even reach Elephant Cove overnight, so don't look for a lot of change here, maybe a little bit of an increase in the low clouds and fog along the outer coastline of the Panhandle. An area of rain right through here from the Central Brooks Range, kind of an extended area of light rain, and that'll go right on down into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And then from there, mostly in the form of showers here across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island. With that trough, still a chance of showers, cloudy skies tonight. This low out here just making for some IFR due to the light rain, fog, and drizzle, and ceilings below 1,000 feet. That'll extend up to the Pribilofs, and a little bit better here out over the Bering Sea, but still marginal, probably IFR here from the Bering Strait right on down toward the Aleutians. Outlook for tomorrow. That low continues to drift right up toward the Noatak Valley and weaken, and that's going to keep an area of light rain, definitely cloudy skies with showers or fog and light drizzle there toward St. Lawrence Island, and shower chances there for the eastern Brooks Range, and up along the Arctic coast, North Slope, look for periods of light rain and fog. Sunny again here in the eastern interior, high 75 to 80, 81, 82 or so. Copper River Basin a little drier tomorrow. Look for partly sunny skies here in the Anchorage area with some afternoon showers over the mountains, mostly. And this front really washing out, just a weak trough here with some showers that will remain mostly off the coast. Could drift in toward the north coast, but whatever does will be quite light. And then for the outlook on Tuesday, still a chance of some scattered showers, mostly cloudy skies over the northern southeast coast, Juneau on up to Haines, Skagway, Elephant Cove, and partly to mostly sunny down toward the Ketchikan, Net, Klawock, Craig, and Metlakatla areas. And we've got a trough out in the west for some shower chances, a little bit more extensive here in the west than they will be in the east, but these will be mostly developing in the afternoon, and should be unstable enough that any one of those showers could develop into an isolated thunderstorm here over the eastern interior, maybe back to the west even, and a trough with some light rain, fog, and drizzle again for the Pribilof Islands down toward the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. This low mostly is staying to the south and gradually improving on out to the west. Low temperatures for tonight, 50 to 55 central eastern interior Alaska, upper 20s central Arctic coast, 40s here in the west and southwest interior, and 30s when you out over the Bering Sea to near 40 in the Aleutians, and 48 to 52 for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow 70 to 80 plus there over the eastern interior, near 70 at Fairbanks, near 70 down at Ketchikan and Skagway. And then the lows for the Tuesday morning time frame, upper 40s, lower 50s for the Panhandle, and a little cooler now, dropping back into the, I call it 45 to 50 eastern interior, mid 40s central areas, all the way out to near 40 along the southwest coast. Just 30 there, the coldest spot now for the central Arctic coast, 40s southern Alaska. And then taking a look at the high temperatures for Tuesday afternoon, back into the 60s at least. Looks like a little bit cooler for the southeast coast there. And also some cooling going on here over the eastern interior. Highs now topping out just at 70. There'll probably be some 72, 3 or 4 showing up like around Chokyitzik. But anyway, upper 60s in the Tanana Valley, 55 to 60 to mid 60s in the Copper River Basin. Cooler out to the west as usual there with 39 at Shishmaref, and then 10 degrees warmer than that at Nome. Upper 30s to lower 40s for the North Slope, and out in the west, lower 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic for Monday morning. Swath of IFR here, southern Bering Sea, northeastward, right through the strait and up along the northwest coast there, wrapping around to just south of Point Lay. Central eastern coast, IFR. Pretty well VFR area, or mostly VFR here over interior Alaska. Some marginal there out to the west a little bit, and good VFR into Canada. Some marginal VFR and IFR up along the southern Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound, and all of that staying just off the southeast coast. Tomorrow afternoon, the marginal VFR kind of creeps right up to the coastline of the Panhandle, otherwise VFR. VFR Bristol Bay, some marginal VFR developing over the southwest mountains, otherwise good VFR over the interior until you get up to the mostly the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range here, DeLong Mountains, and areas IFR, central Arctic coast, with that area of IFR still extending down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, just catching the Pribilofs, and then off to the west, marginal for the Aleutians. Following morning on Tuesday, IFR, the Arctic coast, no change out here really over the Bering Sea at all, with marginal VFR up and inland along the southwest coast, Norton Sound, and into the Selawik Valley and northern Kobuk Valley there to the Brooks Range. Good VFR continues in the interior. Marginal along the southeast coast. IFR still up in toward Cordova, western Prince William Sound, on down along Kodiak Island. And for the afternoon Tuesday, still great conditions over the interior with a lot of VFR, even ways off the coast there, the Yukon Delta and the eastern part of Seward Peninsula. Some IFR in the central Arctic coast. Pretty good zone of IFR also from the Bering Strait down in across the central Bering, and then kind of angling back to about Adak on out to Kiska Island. IFR continues along the east side of the Kenai Peninsula in toward Passage Canal, and also for the eastern North Gulf Coast, down along the Panhandle. Got some marginal now working in a little bit farther inland there over the inside waters, even in the afternoon. For passes tomorrow, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, slow improvement in conditions throughout the day, probably becoming VFR into the later in the afternoon. And that same trend also for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill looks like kind of an occasional marginal type of day there for both of those passes. Rainy, marginal VFR improving to VFR. And for windy, possible marginal VFR at times on the southern entrance, mostly before noon, and otherwise VFR. And for Isabel, same marginal to start, becoming VFR. And from Mentasta, southern entrance vulnerable to some marginal VFR, otherwise not too bad VFR flying there. Tanita, marginal VFR possibly in the morning, will be VFR late in the morning, in through the afternoon. And for Portage, IFR to start, becoming marginal VFR, so a slow improvement in conditions throughout the day and into the afternoon and evening. For Chilkoot and White, looks like another VFR day for those two passes coming up. And for the freezing levels here, again, that upper ridge holding over Western Canada, and the air mass continues to warm. 12,000 feet there up over toward the Northwest Territories and Yukon. 10,000 feet just edging into the eastern interior. 6,000 to 8,000 feet up there across the Brooks Range in the North Slope, Arctic coast, and then a little bit cooler here, 4,000 feet over the northern Bering Sea to 6. So really not much of a gradient out here across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And for the icing threat, kind of a zone of areas of light to isolated, really isolated, considerable moderate rime icing here in this zone. And then like over the southwest mountains, that's even less of a threat and just a risk there around the Pribilofs. All above about 6,000 to 7,000 feet out here. This remnants of the front, I probably shouldn't even have put that in. And what would be left would be above 11,000 feet with those high freezing levels. And for the jet stream here, good trough, center of which over the eastern Aleutians, flow coming down out of the northwest here on the west side of that. 60 to 70, picked up about 140 knots south of the central Aleutians. Kind of a split flow, or there is a split flow right here. One branch came up around the upper level high, 80 to 90 knots cutting across the eastern interior. 9,000 feet looking like this, southwest 10 to 15, maybe 20 knots over the Panhandle, and 20 to 25 here into the southern eastern interior, kind of a zone of stronger winds right through here, 25 to 35 knots right up across the Brooks Range, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, lighter into the trough axis over the eastern Bering Sea. And for 3,000 feet, about the same. The strongest winds here across Bristol Bay, Kodiak, roughly up into the west central interior. Anywhere from 25 to maybe 30 knots. Light for the Panhandle, turbulence-wise. Occasional light to isolated moderate chop, central Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, right on up to the western Brooks Range.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand. And by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis. Not a lot of difference from what it was yesterday. Everything kind of holding a stationary status quo with the push toward the continued melting and thawing phase. And that scenario will continue here for the next 5 or 6 days. And moving on to coastal water forecasts. Light west winds at 10 knots on the south coast here with seas roughly 6 feet. Turning south and then to east here as you go north up toward Yakutat, but still 10 knots. Real light variable winds here over the central southern inside waters and south 15 in the afternoon for Lynn Canal. And then that picks up a little bit more of a breeze for Lynn Canal on Tuesday, south 20 seas 4 feet. And south to southeast drift there at about 10 knots for the central and southern inside waters. 15 knots out of the west for the south coast and west 10 knots up on the north side. Prince William Sound, southeast 15 tomorrow with seas roughly 2 feet and 10 knot winds for the North Gulf Coast, pretty light, 6 to 7 foot seas. Southeast 20 here for the Barren Islands, 30 knots, good small craft advisories there with that southeast wind for the Kamishak Bay area, and that'll push the seas up to about 10 feet. Otherwise, southern Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands, winds will be from the south at 20 knots with 5 foot seas. I'll look for Tuesday, southwest 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Cook Inlet, east 20 for Kamishak Bay, same thing for the Barren Islands, and southwest at 10 for the North Gulf Coast. A couple of really light wind days coming up there, also for Prince William Sound. And for Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, southeast 20 tomorrow, seas 5 to 8 feet, and southeast 20, southwest of Sitkinak, as well as King Salmon, all the way down the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula to Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, south at 20. I'll look for Tuesday, small craft advisory level winds for at 25 knots here from Cape Sarachev right up to Sitkinak, and then back down to southeast 20 up the east side of Kodiak. 20 knot winds here for Bristol Bay, as well as the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. And for the western Aleutians, north-northwest at about 20 knots, and that same pattern extends right over Adak and Atka at the same speed with those 7 to 8 foot seas. On Alaska Island, rough maybe on Unmak Island, south to southeast, 15 to 20. And for Tuesday, east winds become northeast here from Unmak Island from Dutch Harbor there, Those ones only 15 knots, a little bit of an increase in the winds here, especially south of Adak and Atka, northwest 25, and north to northwest at 20 continues west of Adak to Shemya. For the St. Lawrence Island zone, north 15 tomorrow, pretty light. That pattern right down to the north side of Nunivak Island as well as St. Matthew Island, northeast at 20 for the Pribilofs, and then southeast 20 here along the Kuskokwim Delta coast. And for Tuesday, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, light winds from the south, 10 knots at most. East 15, north side of, or along the Yukon Delta coast. Kuskokwim Delta coast, east of 20. Otherwise, 15 out of the northeast, St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George Islands. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, central Beaufort Sea coast, and the western Arctic coast there, all 25 knots out of the east, with even the east side here getting some seas now at about 6 feet. And then those 20 knot winds from, or they dropped to 20 knots from Cape Thompson down to Wales. And even lighter, or winds will be lighter on Tuesday. Wales to Cape Thompson, light west winds at about 10, southwest 15 from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, and then the western Arctic coast, south 15. Winds stay east up here for the central and east coast. Winds come down, although they maintain the small craft advisory levels here for the eastern zone. And for tonight, again, this low continues to weaken as it drifts northward. And that's going to produce a kind of a widespread area of light rain or showers here from the southern slopes of the Brooks Range right down across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, even the eastern Norton Sound area, and still some fog drizzle possibilities for the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. This low will keep it, again, pretty damp and unsettled there for the central Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, pretty showery into Kodiak. And this weakening front will push narrow band of rain, trying to push it eastward. It doesn't even quite make the coast tomorrow. Sunny and warm in the interior, rain back up to the north and northwest. And then for Tuesday, isolated to scattered showers, mostly cloudy, northern Panhandle, partly sunny to the south. And in the afternoon, showers on the increase here due to the convection with isolated thunderstorms central interior and chance of showers with trough in the west. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.